If you had 1 minute to coach someone on their mindset and their performance, how would you do it? Whenever I feel like someone is not executing up to their full potential, there's basically a 5-step process that I take people through. So here's the first step in this. What needs to be the main thing you're focusing on? How can we give you no wiggle room for bullshit? Is there anybody in your environment that if they weren't already there, would you want to bring them back? If you had 1 minute to coach someone on their mindset and their performance, how would you do it? So this was basically the question I was asked after a keynote I gave recently. At the end of it, a bunch of people came up, they asked questions, and it was kind of a speed round of me just trying to figure out what someone's block is, quickly answer it, quickly move them on so I get everybody in line. And after about 3 or 4 people, the next guy in line, he was just like, dude, how did you do that? And I just laughed and said, no. How did you actually do that? Like, what's your framework? How did you get these people answers so fast that were like aha moments for all of them? And I was like, oh, it's pretty simple. It's a 5-step process. I just try to find what their constraint is. And he was like, oh, interesting. So instead of my question, can I ask you about that? And I said, sure. And that's actually what I want to share on the pod today. That whenever I feel like someone is not executing up to their full potential, whatever their skill set should allow them to, there's basically a 5-step process that I take people through. And I figure out what is their constraint. And there is a progression to these, but you can obviously also play jazz with that. So that's what we're going to be covering today. Then we're going to be covering how to actually use AI to help you do that better. And we'll talk about a couple of examples of that. So first off, Alex, welcome to the pod, man. Good to see you.
Thank you, Itamar. Good to see you too. Looking forward to getting into this.
Cool. So here's the thing. When someone is blocked, and by blocked, I mean, they know they could be doing more with their skill set and they feel that kind of frustration. They actually want to do something about it and they're not doing it. From what I've seen, coaching again, like hundreds of entrepreneurs, all the way from 6 to 9 figures, same patterns. It's that there's usually one of 5 things that are holding them back. Now, with that said, there is a linear process where you first make sure this is okay. Then you check off that box and you check off that box and so on and so on. So before we get started, anything on your end about this?
Just anxiety about what the 5 things are. I'm looking forward to finding out what the. Not really anxiety, just maybe it's excitement. I love understanding foundational models or frameworks, because I think that it gives you, once you learn a framework, even though the framework might have been shared under one topic or one domain, usually I've found that they are interchangeable, and it's almost like developing a new mental skill in life that you can then apply to other areas. So yeah, I love this stuff. Yeah. I'm looking forward to finding out.
Yeah, like honestly, I don't think I probably really came up with any of these. You know, I mean, it's probably something that some Greek guy said 3,000 years ago and applied it to this or to that, and it's centralizing these things and putting them out there. So here's the first step in this. The first step, when someone says, I feel a bit stuck, I'm like, first of all, are you clear on what you actually want? And usually people are like, not really. I've just kind of been going through the motions. Momentum has carried me, whatever it may be. And that's kind of the first thing on a couple levels. So let's break down clarity. So there's clarity on the surface level, which everybody talks about, which is, what am I supposed to be doing? What should be my focus? Right? But there's much deeper levels to it. There's also, are you clear about what you want out of life and how you doing this will align to that? Because in the background, 2 things. First off, it provides a lot of fuel. Like as Nietzsche said, he has a strong enough why can overcome anyhow. And that's a big thing. If you're not clear on why you're doing something, when things get hard, you're going to be like, is this really worth it? Probably not. That's part 1. Part 2 is that if you haven't clearly mapped out what you want in life and how you want your life to look like, but you subconsciously kind of know it, and you doing a certain thing in your business, even if it's going to get long-term growth, in the short term impedes on that, there's going to be a part of you that's going to resist doing that. So like, oh, I want to go surfing every day for 5 hours. That's what you think in the back of your head. Where you're like, if I build this product out or I go on more sales call, that's going to impede in that. There's going to be a part in you that you're not aware of that's just going to block that, even though you logically know that's going to grow the business. So the first thing is someone actually clear on what they should be doing and why that'll serve the kind of life that they want. And in order to do that, they have to be clear on actually what they want out of life. And that's not something that, they talk about in traction or whatever it may be. But it is a constraint I see so often.
So it's clarity of end outcome,
Yes.
clarity of what actions are required to get end outcome. Would you add to that clarity
Before
of
that,
predictable
no, I would
consequences?
correct. I would correct that. So it's not clarity on what actions, it's clarity on what your main focus needs to be right now. So like
Okay.
actions is the smaller tactics. That comes next. Honestly, it's like the next step. But first is clarity on what you want out of life and clarity. Okay, like if you want this out of life, what should be your main focus for this next season, for this next quarter, for this next year? What needs to be the main thing you're focusing on? Like, for example, like we're focusing just on the book right now. That's the main thing we're focusing on. You're focusing on just launching the gyms in Singapore right now. That's it. So that's really like that kind of, okay, what's the focus?
Right. Would you include clarity of the costs involved?
I do that next. It's a great question.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it's like,
Cool.
but yeah, it's a great question. So you basically with clarity, and this is something honestly that with entrepreneurs, I see this less because a lot of them usually are willing to accept the cost. It's part of them. You know, they have that grind in them. However, when I work with, I'm starting to work in corporate a little bit now, and I do workshops for the C-suite. The C-suite employees, and especially the mid-level managers, they sometimes want the prize, but they don't accept the cost. They're not aligned on both of them. Like they want the prize, but they're not willing to pay the price, or they haven't actually been aware of it yet. And it's an exercise I actually run them through. We're like, okay, this is what you want, right? What is that going to require? Let's get it all on paper. It's going to require you to miss this, sacrifice that, be uncomfortable in this way, emotionally challenge yourself here, whatever it might be. Great. Now that we got all this on paper, let's honestly look at it. Are you okay with that? And it's okay to say no. Like I'm giving you, like there's a door out right there. There's no ego stuff. Everyone wants a different life. It's perfectly okay to say no. And what's interesting is that some of them are like, you know what, when I actually look at it on paper right now and I'm calm and I'm not just going through like, oh, I'm supposed to get a promotion, I'm supposed to go higher. I actually don't want that. And some of them are like, you know what? Yeah, I'm up for it. Let's go. And either direction they go, it's infinitely better than the kind of just like waddling along that was going up until then. So it is included in that. But honestly, with entrepreneurs, I usually see that as less of a necessity.
Got it. Makes sense.
It's a great question, though. Cool. So that's part one, the clarity. Then part two, if someone knows what they want out of life, they know that this is the thing, if they focus on, it's going to get them closer to there and they're committed to it as far as the price, like Alex said, and they still feel stuck. It's like, okay, are you clear on what you should be doing? Like, what are the 1 to 3 most impactful actions that you could be taking? And a lot of times people are like, not really. And of course, they're going to hesitate because of that. And this is hard because a lot of times getting clarity on those actions is a bit challenging. And it requires more than just going into your emails and seeing something popped up. You really have to take a step back and you have to think about this from a strategic perspective, perhaps get outside help, which again, most people don't find comfortable, but like going to ask a friend, going to ask a business mastermind, whatever it may be, like, how did you get from here to there? But that is the next step. That, okay, you have clarity on what you want, what the focus needs to be. Are you clear on what the 1 to 3 most impactful actions that could be? And clear by meaning to a level where you see them and you have them, you're like, this is it. And all of a sudden you feel this kind of like, oh, I can definitely go at that. If I can just nail that, I'm excited about it. I get it. It's clear. Let's go.
With actions, do you find that people might have the ability to vocalize an action? So if I want to lose body fat, I should probably work out, but they might not be as clear on the intensity, frequency, duration, etc., like the nuance behind the action?
Yeah. So it's a great question. And I think this is the point where you have to figure out those 1 to 3 impactful actions. If you're not clear on the technical level, tactical level, whatever you want to call it, it's like this is where you have to go deeper until you get to, so what I used to do, especially with my early on clients, we used to do like a clarity map that it was basically a pyramid. You start at the top. This is what I want. Okay, in order to do that, what are the main 3 things required to achieve that? Okay, in order to achieve this thing, what are the main 3 things that are required to achieve that? What are the 3 things that are until you get to this point where everything is just really crystal clear. You're like, okay, I understand all the steps required. And again, the beautiful part about this, but forcing yourself or having someone to do these exercises with, a group, whatever it may be, so you actually do them. Because at the end of the day, we usually have the answers in us somewhere, or we can, especially with AI these days, we can find the answers. But it's just about sitting down, saying, okay, this is uncomfortable. I don't feel like I'm completely competent. Like I know exactly what I should be doing. But let's just nail this in step by step. And it's just a process. I think, again, like with most of these things, with AI right now, you probably can't figure it out. Or with access to certain communities and so on.
Yep.
Do you agree, disagree, or like what are your thoughts on this?
I have found anecdotally that the nuance behind the actions, I'll use working out as an example. If someone says, I'm fat, I want to be fit, got it. What do I have to do? The action is go to the gym. Well, if you go to the gym and sit on your iPhone whilst you're at the gym, technically you went to the gym, you tick that box. Yeah. You didn't actually do the things required at the gym. And so the nuance, maybe the nuance isn't the right term, but the sort of the technical details behind those actions of like the intensity, the duration, the frequency, in a business context, I think that people will focus on an action almost like a label without going deep enough as to the more technical aspects of that action. Like Hormozy always talks about just like the sheer volume behind a lot of his business efforts. And that's where I've had the biggest breakthroughs in business. Wasn't necessarily just understanding the action, but the detail of that action is usually what separated the success versus the challenges.
Yeah, it's a great point. I appreciate you bringing it up. So what I should clarify, and like you probably remember this from doing the arena back in the day, in the trackers, at the end of it, we have the actions, but also behind this one, what is a quantitative output? Something that is inarguable. Like going to the gym is like, that's arguable. Did you do it well? That's arguable. Did you do 10 reps at 40%, whatever it is, Did you do those? Did you also do half an hour of cardio at whatever heartbeat it might be? These things are pretty irrefutable. And I appreciate you bringing it up because you do want to nail it to a point where, again, we're talking about clarity. It's extreme clarity in that sense. It's not I need to go to the gym, but no, I need to go to the gym and do this and do that and do this.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah, because
so
I think in business,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, in business, whether if it was maybe sales, whether it's inbound, outbound, is going to be, how many times are you following up a lead? What time of the day are you following up that lead? What's the actual narrative or the tonality? What's actually going on in that sort of point of contact? That's usually where I've seen the biggest breakthroughs in business, is to digging into that detail, because it's very easy at surface level to say, yes, I'm doing outbound, or yes, I'm responding to inbound inquiry. What usually separates the A players versus the C is those details of the tenacity, the frequency, the intensity. And so without the perfect Google Maps of business, I just usually optimize towards extremism of like extreme volume, extreme sort of reactive times, etc. And it usually plays out pretty well.
It's very well said. I usually optimize towards putting people on the hook in a very clear manner. So like what I try to do with these rules when we break it down for people is how can we give you no wiggle room for bullshit? So this is the exact thing. You need to be doing this for you, like saying it's volume, the amount of follow-ups, how you follow up, or you hit these checkpoints during the follow-up, whatever it might be. And if we can get it to a point where there's no wiggle room for your brain to bullshit yourself about why it's okay to not do this, because, I kind of went to the gym today, it's okay, or I kind of followed up some people, that's when we really get to that point where you have extreme clarity on what you should be doing. Now, whether you actually execute on it, that's different, but that's the next step. I think that's really the first part of it, getting that extreme clarity to a place where you can't argue it. It is so clear, you are very clearly putting yourself on the hook for excellence. And now it's about, can you live up to that? And how can we help you live up to that?
Perfect. So
and that's
clarity. Number 2, actions.
And again, this all fits into, like, let's say, like a clarity chunk here. At first, this is, if you do this, you will get the life that you want. But again, that is easier said than done. But that's what I do first with people. I just kind of run through my head quickly. Do they have clarity on this? Are they actually clear on their actual steps? And like you said, the conversation very goes, okay, like, they're like, I'm not doing something. I feel a bit stuck. Okay, are you clear on what you want out of life? You're like, No. Okay. Figure that out. Everything else is going to be a downstream effect of that. They say yes. I'm like, okay, great. Are you clear what your next season you need to focus on? What's the main constraint that if you solve is going to make the biggest impact? If they say no, cool, work on that. If they say yes, I'm like, great. Okay. How clear on you on the bottom actions, very specific, that somebody in your place, if they wanted to achieve this, would have to be taking? How clear are you on a scale of 1 to 10? If they say like, 6, cool. You got to go, like how we said, a couple layers down that chain and really clarify those. If they say 10, beautiful. Okay, now we keep going. So that's that part. It's really clear. Now, what I've seen, and this is very interesting. So I'm part of a couple separate communities that I sometimes talk at and I'm part of and so on. And one of them is, let's call it more lifestyle entrepreneurs. A lot of them have location independent businesses. And one of them is more growth entrepreneurs. These have like really big brick and mortar businesses. And this is something that I've seen in both of these communities, but especially in the lifestyle one. So I'll share a story before I explain it. That with one client, and he was a bit of a younger guy. He was in his late 20s. He was still single. And he really wanted to grow his business so he could get it to an exit. And we figured out what he needs to do, all these things. And he's like, oh, I could tell he was resisting it a little bit, even though we had crystal clarity. I said, what's up? And he's like, man, honestly, like I'm afraid life will get boring. And I don't want to just build a boring life. And I was like, great. Because this is something we get to work on now that you vocalized it. And it was one of those things that if you're, again, crafting this life that you do not want to live, a part of you is going to resist that. And you're not going to do it. You're going to, whether self-sabotage, slow down your speed, or whatever it may be, you're going to hit a certain pain line internally that you're not going to want to cross. So what we said for him, okay, like what would need to be in place for you to feel like you're actually living a life you're excited about? Like, this is still fun. I'm getting to grow the business. I'm going to take it to an exit, and I'm still having fun. And he said, oh, you know what? It's actually not that much. I want to be able to go out once a week. I want to be able to also go out. And I say, wait, like, until when? Like, what would be the point of like diminishing returns? He's like, 2 a.m. Right. All right. What else do you want to do? I want to be able to do this. I want to be able to do that. And we figured out that if we put all these things into his calendar preemptively, all of a sudden he looks at his calendar and he's like, oh, you know what? This is cool. I want to do this. That part of him that was resisting it before doesn't exist anymore. And it was interesting because once he did that, he really, really started scaling the business. He already had really, like, honestly, when I look at it, he probably had clarity on what he needed to do before that. It was just that piece of internal resistance that was stopping him from actually going for it. Because he felt like once I step into this and I really do these things, life is going to be unpleasant. And it's a concept now I call guardrails. And it's something I put in for myself as well. Like, I have surf sessions every week. I have date nights with my wife in the calendar every week. I have time with my son every week. These are things that if I share my calendar, you see that they just roll out into the infinite future, basically. These are just blocks of time minus the surf, because unfortunately the ocean isn't that consistent. But like these date nights and times with my kid, those are things that are pre-built into the calendar. It's my main concern is that as I build the business, I don't want to lose my relationship, or I don't want to not see my kid growing up. And I found that when you put in these guardrails for people, it goes a really, really long way into giving them the mental permission to really go for it.
That example you showed before with your client, was there some degree of possibly like a false assumption on his part about those actions? It wasn't until he got clear on those actions that he actually felt that sense of relief. Because from hearing you recall that story, it seemed to me that there was a gap in terms of defining the actions, which was giving him the resistance. And when he went through the process of I guess, sort of habitualizing or...
Yeah, actually, I'm. It's a great question, because I think there's a deeper answer to it. I think I'm thinking about a couple guys that kind of pop into my head with these similar examples. And it's not that they're not clear on the specific things, it's that they're not clear that that's a possibility. Because a lot of the messaging is like, oh, go in monk mode, go into an extreme, like go to Silicon Valley, kill 10 years of your life off, and then rise again.
Right.
And
right.
they're not aware there's an option C, that you can still go into growth mode in a bit of a more sustainable way. Is it still intense?
Yes.
Absolutely. But is it going to leave you with infinitely less regrets if you're just systematic about it? Yes, as well. I mean, and I think that was the main thing. He wasn't aware that's an option. That you can, it's not exactly have your cake and eat it too, but kind of, you know what I mean? Just make sure that the important things don't fall off.
Right. So it's almost like losing a bit of personal agency in that there's previously, maybe an analogy was, there's these different modes that you can go into as an entrepreneur. Monk mode is one of them. Normally these modes are sort of defined by work all hours of the day and nothing else matters. That's almost like picking somebody else's approach and just adopting that. Whereas if you just remind yourself that you are the engineer of your own reality, and that how hard you work or what sacrifices you make does not necessarily equal business outcome. Some of the hardest working people who make the biggest sacrifices walk away with nothing, and people who might dial it in or do next to nothing might have a huge outcome. And so reminding ourselves that we are the engineer and that we can take agency in our approach, as opposed to adopting something which media or business influences feed us. Yeah.
And I think it's also about, there's an interesting intersection of two principles here. One, of the point of diminishing returns, that again, even if you work a certain amount of time in a day, at a certain point, like your productivity is going to fall off, and recognizing that you can't fill up your calendar with 18 hours a day like some people want to pretend that they do. That's point one. And point two is sustainability. That one of the easiest ways to fail as an entrepreneur is to not want to keep playing the game. If you're like, I do not like this game, I do not want to keep playing it, that's when people quit. And that's what you see with a lot of businesses that close down. They're like, I can't deal with it. In COVID, that happened a lot. A lot of people are like, I can't, business is already challenging. There's also all this, I can't handle it. And by putting these things into your schedule, it actually makes it much more desirable. So even like with one CEO that I'm working at multiple 9 figures, when we started introducing these things into his schedule, all of a sudden his business actually started going better because he was more excited about it all of a sudden. He was like, he said, I didn't know this could actually be enjoyable. I thought this was going to have to just be a slog for the next couple of years. And for example, like with the weight loss example that you gave, if you notice somebody, they say, I really want to lose weight. I know it's important for my health, for my quality of life, for everything. And like Alex gave me a game plan. I went to one of his gyms. I know exactly what I should be doing, down to a T. But they're not doing it. It could be that the big thing is, it could be a silly thing. They're like, man, I have this one weekly dinner with friends that I feel like I'm going to have to sacrifice. And I don't want to do that because my social life is important to me. And if you were just telling them, no, you can actually just go have that one dinner. That could be your cheat meal, or in that dinner, you can just have these foods, whatever it may be. You'd be like, oh, okay, now I can do that. Now I'm open for it. And it's just
100%. Yeah, I've seen that in the fitness world a lot. I've seen it in the business world a lot. And I think that's the danger sometimes of being a lone wolf in these things, that if you don't have other people to think out loud with, to act as an accountability buddy, you can convince yourself that's truth and keep on marching forwards with this essentially false belief that the benefit of groups and performance coaches like yourself is that you've got structured ways to, I guess, play devil's advocate to yourself and hopefully identify what should be a false belief as being false, discard it and replace it with something else.
Yeah, there's always, we like to think in binary ways, and an external perspective can always be like, hey, what about option C, D, and E?
Exactly.
And that's usually hard to do for ourselves. It's one of the basic laws of decision-making theory, is that whenever you're faced with a decision to either do this or that, ask yourself, if I couldn't do either, what would be option C, D, or E? And it's just like that simple rule of thumb can go a really long way. Cool. So kind of bringing it back in, someone's really clear on what they want out of life. They're clear what their main focus should be. They're clear on the tactics, like you said, to a T. Then you ask them, like, okay, do you feel like life would be terrible if that's what you did? If they say yes, they're like, okay, great. How can we not make it terrible? What are the things you would have to have in place? If they say no, they're like, okay, great. Let's continue on. That's the next step. The next step is performance anchors. Performance anchors are basically, do you have things in your environment that are just making this so hard and so annoying and so unpleasant or just uncomfortable that it's causing this to be much more painful than it needs to be? And therefore, again, it's not sustainable. And I'll say this, the word sustainability throughout this, because I think motivation and inspiration is great. It's important. But beyond that, like if you have a system where things are consistently harder than they need to be, you're just fighting an uphill battle. And that's not sustainable. It's not effective. So performance anchors. On a low level, this is just all the stuff that we have going on in our lives that doesn't serve our focus for right now. And it drains our a lot of energy. Anything small from, like the stupid WhatsApp groups that people are in that we sometimes get sucked into. Anything from the people in our workspace that aren't performing at certain things that we just kind of let it slide, all the way to the deep things. And the deep things, the deep anchors, are usually the ones that really hold people back. And these are relationships. And it could be romantic relationships. It could be professional relationships with his the co-founder that you and him just simply do not mesh, with an employee who was your star employee when you were just starting out. He was great. And now either he's regressed through whatever reasons his life has brought up and he's just regressed and he's not that person anymore. He's not committed as much. Or also it's completely outgrown his skill set, but you still feel bad about it. But he keeps dragging everything down. And every time you move something forward, he causes a bunch of slip-ups and it's frustrating, but it's a very deep thing. Like I feel a sense of loyalty to him, or just certain people in your social circle. You're like, this person just drains my energy so much. It's like for some people, it's their in-laws. That's a classic one. But what are all these performance anchors that are things that are just making this much harder than they need to be, sorry.
What's the most common performance anchor? I know that's a possible question to answer, but is it relationships, as you sort of pointed to before?
So
right.
It's interesting. The most common one, I'll split that question up a little bit. So I'll differentiate the most common one and the most impactful.
Okay.
So the most common one, are those WhatsApp groups, spending too much time on your phone on YouTube or whatever it may be. Because you're like, I shouldn't be doing that. Like, cool. So just put your phone in the other room. Just make that a rule of thumb.
Yeah.
However, the performance anchors that I've seen that once people, cut them off, they go really, really fast, is the relationships. And there's also something about how close that relationship is that has a direct correlation. So cutting off an employee, especially if it's not their skill set that's been outgrown, but it's their, let's call it their set of values and who they are and whatever it may be, that gives a big boost. The thing that gives the biggest boost, and this is the thing that's uncomfortable to say, is that some people recognize that they shouldn't have gone into that marriage and they cut it off. And was a weird, I was at a conference last July, and one guy who I'd never met in person, but we kind of knew each other through similar circles. And he was like, so is your job to help people get divorced? And I just laughed. And he happened to know 3 people that went through the program that realized that. And the reality is that it's a hard thing. A lot of times people get married when they're young and either it was the wrong person or it was the exact right person, but they both just naturally grew apart for whatever reasons. And they have different desires in life. And if you have someone where every time you try to do what you want to do, they're not even telling you don't do it, but you can just feel this resistance. Or they're not even just supporting you. That's a big anchor. And it's like, again, we talked a lot about that pain line. Like, you don't want to do something if it's going to be so uncomfortable. Subconsciously, it's that as well. Like, we crave approval. It's part of our species. It's how we wired. So if the person that you're the closest to, so to speak, doesn't approve of what you're doing, it's going to naturally just drain your energy. And those are the ones, those performance anchors, like, obviously there's usually a dip at first. So someone has to, feel like even if you know it's the right thing, you get the wind knocked out of you a little bit and you have recovery time, you do that. But then usually people go up really, really high, really quick. Ways that you're like, wow, I as a coach sometimes to these people, like, I didn't know they had that in them. That's wild. That's the place where people really surprise me when they let go of a performance anchor that's deep. That's when they really, really I'm like, I didn't think that's where they were going to get to. That's wild and it's amazing. So does that kind of answer that question?
It does. I want to ask about the relationships side. So whether it's a romantic relationship, spousal, whatever, or it's business partnership. What do you think leads to a situation where people essentially either drift apart in a connection, or they were both at the same level of competency in a certain domain, and over time, one person's of higher value than the other? What do you think allows that to sit in subconscious until a point, if ever, it's realized that they can actually then decide what to do about it?
I'm going to answer this in a different way. So what I've seen with, this is both the guys and the women that have coached and have gone through this, is that they were just insecure. They didn't see themselves for who they were when they were younger. Like, honestly, like, it's usually a correlation with people that were a bit out of shape as well physically, and that probably had something to do with it. But it was a consistent pattern where I remember one guy was saying, and I was like, man, that is one of the bravest things, like one of the most honest and like bravest things I've ever heard someone say. And he was telling me, like, I was scared and I married someone who I thought I was good enough for at that time. And even though I logically knew that this is not a great person, and they were married, I think, for almost like 25 years or something like that. And they had a bunch of kids together. And he was like, finally, I just had to accept it. And I had to recognize, you know what, like, that was a decision. I made it from a place of fear where I thought I wasn't good enough. And I thought that this person would never leave me because, like, they're not really good and I'm not really good, but I'm like a little bit better than this. So they would never leave me. And I think for most of these people, that's usually where it comes from what I've seen. Again, I have very small amount of data with this. It actually not as my main thing, as that guy at the conference said. But from what I've seen, that's usually what it is. When people are afraid of not being good enough or adequate enough, they try to find someone that they feel comfortable around, not someone that they actually are inspired by or that improves their life or whatever it may be.
Right. Yeah, I wonder if lack of measurement, it's like that old adage of what gets measured gets improved. To make an athletics analogy here, if you and I were both joining some athletics team right now and we both run 100 meters at the exact same time, but over time, you're improving and I'm stagnant. If you start to level up through the divisions and now you're on the sort of competition team or whatever, there's probably not a whole lot of difficult conversations between us about why I'm not on the relay team at this stage, because day after day, week after week, we're measuring numbers and I can see that you're improving and I'm not. And what I've found in my business, right, I'm at a point in my entrepreneurial life where my care factor about how my employees perceive me has never been lower, yet the relationships have never been stronger.
Yep.
And the reason is that if I could go back to the stage for, yeah, sure.
I'm curious to see if I'll hit the nail on the head with this. Is because when in the past, when you cared more about how they were perceived you weren't they didn't have as much clarity on what they should be doing, so they didn't know how to succeed. Is that it?
Exactly that. So it was an 11 on good intentions and a much lower number in terms of structure, policies, standards, auditing, reviewing, etc. And so over time, I've just learned from past mistakes and very, very clear on expectations, what good looks like, how would I explain it through a number, how often are we going to measure this, and it allows people to understand, are they sort of at or below the standard that you're expecting of them on a really consistent basis, and it's sort of it's a great maintenance of the relationship. It doesn't allow the weeds to grow, where a situation like I've had many times in the past where someone thinks they're performing brilliantly, I think they're performing terribly, and then we have to have a lot of friction in the relationship to sort of solve that equation. Whereas if they've got more consistent, more accurate feedback on their performance, like the sprinting analogy, I know what 100 meters looks like, I know what time is. If I know what the expectation is and I'm meeting or exceeding that, then I can tick the box that I'm sort of competent in my role. And I wonder if that's one of the things that leads to these rifts in dynamics over time. That what started off as a good idea is no longer a good idea at some point in the future. And I think that in some part it comes down to that either oversight or just inability to actually understand what they should be tracking and track it on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think it's a big part. Like, I really agree with you on this. I think the way I take in what you're saying in a more blunt fashion is a lot of relationships get ruined because people don't feel comfortable saying exactly what they want, quantifying that, and then getting the other person to be like, hey, do you actually want to do this or not? It's just this silence of what are my expectations? What do I hope this person does? And then, like, with all those kind of things, they rarely get met.
Do you think that's from a place of not being comfortable about sharing expectations, and in some way that's bad or demanding?
This is a big one. It's a big one, and it's a segue for what we're doing, but I think it's actually a good one to talk about.
Sure.
So I'll put it this way. I think there's a couple things here. First off, there's some things that people are thinking that you're not supposed to be able to say. You're not allowed to say this. You're not allowed to say to, like, your partner, hey, I want to have sex twice a week. Like, especially if you're just past having a kid or whatever it may be. You're not allowed to say, like, hey, this is what I want you to do. It's like, no, you can't change somebody. It's not about changing somebody. It's about them. Like, we want to live a great life together. Like, this is my perspective. We want to live a great life together. For example, me and my wife. We each have a tracker for each other. Like how we have the performance trackers from the arena, we have a similar one for each other, where it's her job, her responsibility to clarify what she wants out of me as a husband, and for me to deliver that, and vice versa. And what that does, and again, there's not a lot of room for confusion there. Does it create an initial friction because I don't want to do this, or she doesn't want to do that, or it doesn't all add up? Absolutely. But it puts it all on the table, and then we can work on it. And I think with a lot of relationships, like social relationships, romantic, there's nothing's ever spoken about until it hits a certain, like, resentment precipice. And then it just gets to be a blow up. And what's, like, to also say, like, what you said about what are the clear standards and so on, what I found to be one of the most interesting things that were unexpected to me when we started doing this was how, and I'm relatively clear on what I want in life, how unclear I was, or how incorrect I was about what actions I thought would deliver what I want. So, for example, I would tell my wife, like, hey, I want you to do this or that. This is what I want out of the relationship. She would do that. Perfect. 10 score. And I was like, that didn't actually give me the feeling that I thought I wanted to have from this. So that's not on her. That's on me. Now I need to figure that out. And she can help me and we can talk about it and so on. But it's a constant process of iteration and clarification. And in business, we do this all the time. We're like, oh, this was the strategy. We did this, like, we hit these KPIs, but we didn't hit the goal. So what happened here? And we know that's something you should be doing. It makes sense. And I think a big part of it is also because, like, if you don't do it, you see the scoreboard very clear as far as the money. So it's a very clear indicator this is working, not working. With relationships, it's not as clear. It's not as tangible of a measure. Like, how much has the bank on gone up or down? And again, it's a taboo thing. Like, you're not supposed to talk about these things. You're not supposed to tell your partner, I want this or I want that. Like, I talked to one entrepreneur and he was like, I told my wife I want to have more sex. She's like, you're not allowed to say that. It's like, okay, like, what do you do from there? You know what I mean? Like, how would you, it's a tough thing. Like, that's kind of my perspective on this, that it's a bit taboo. Some people don't want to talk about it. It's uncomfortable, but it's important.
That's actually a really helpful anecdote because, where I was showing my anecdote as well was coming from the perspective that I think one of the biggest performance anchors is someone's either a subconscious or conscious desire to be liked or appreciated or to avoid conflict. And like the Adler School of Psychology talks about this a lot. There's a great book called The Courage to be Disliked. And when you're very clear about your expectations, by default, there's a probably comparable risk of conflict that the other party, whether it's a romantic partner or a business partner, might not see the world the same way. And so it requires the courage to be clear about what you want, knowing that there's potential friction by sharing that information. But inability or not doing the clear communication is like what most likely allows these unproductive partnerships to drag on for a long period of time. It boils beneath the surface and it all flares up at some point in the future, and you pay the tax downstream.
Yeah. And I think also something people don't talk about is that, so when you're in a relationship with someone that you know isn't a fit for you, what we naturally want to do is blame, say, like, oh, they're the reason why I'm not doing this or that. You know, like why other parts of my life aren't as great as they want to be. The reality is that the more you're in that relationship that you know you shouldn't be in, the more it erodes your self-esteem, because you know you are the kind of, you're being at least the kind of person who stays in something when they know it's the wrong thing. Just out of, like I said, fear of being disliked, fear of being alone, whatever it may be. And the amount that saps your self-confidence and your belief in what you can do is wild. And really what I think the reason these entrepreneurs that I've seen that are like, have removed those kind of relationships from their life and really stepped up and said, this is fucking terrifying. I'm afraid to be alone, especially I'm afraid to be alone at, 40, 50, 60, whatever it may be. And they've actually done it. The biggest impact that's had, not on their energy because this person isn't training them anymore, but on their energy because of their sense of self all of a sudden. The amount of self-respect that they all of a sudden reassume and like have again, that's the big thing. All of a sudden they're like, you know what? I'm the kind of person who does these things. What else could this kind of person do? And kind of everything kicks off in their life. Really, like their health, they usually lose a lot of weight. And they're like other relationships, although they find these really great people. And business and in everything. I think it's really just an identity shift that factors into everything here.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, that definitely has been a huge performance anchor in the past is avoiding difficult conversations because I wanted to be liked or understood or appreciated more than I wanted to actually be clear about what the expectation was. And it's been something which I've anecdotally seen in others as well. So understanding that's a performance anchor is helpful to then untying that anchor and moving forward to a different approach to communication.
Yeah. And to kind of tie it all back in a holistic perspective, this is probably the point where some people think, oh, that's a really cold way to live life. It's like you're only optimizing for certain business goals or external goals, and you're cutting these people off. Like, no. At the very beginning, we said, what do you want out of life in general? Not what do you want out of your business. So what do you want out of your life in general? Is this a performance anchor in regards to that? You're saying, I want to feel constantly, like I want to feel like I have an opportunity to explore, to go do big things, to be excited about life, to deal with hardships. Like, okay, if this is a constant performance anchor to this, someone's not on board with you, it's a performance anchor. And like you said, that language, like I understand having that extreme clarity at the beginning and then say, in relation to that, is this a performance booster or a performance anchor? What is it? And again, like some things obviously aren't absolutes, but where is it on that spectrum? And then, like you said, it's the courage to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
So that's what I figure out. And usually the way I ask is like, how's your environment? Do you think it's facilitating your success or is it kind of holding you down? Is there anybody that in your environment, this is what I ask them. Is there anybody in your environment? This could be personal life, relationships, employees, whatever it may be, that if they weren't already there, would you want to bring them back? Because if the answer to that is no, I wouldn't want to bring them in if they weren't already there. That means that the thing that's causing them to be there is just your discomfort of breaking it off. And that's the uncomfortable truth. And that's really how I go.
That's a really powerful question.
Yeah, it's very uncomfortable. It's like, I'll never ask that people, like, I feel uncomfortable because I can see how people react to that. It's like, okay, we're going to go for it. Which I'll talk about later, I think is the big thing that is important with coaching. But that's part 4, the performance anchors. Part 5 is if everything's clear so far, they're really clear on what they want out of life, what their focus needs to be, how to do it down to a T, like you said. They're, they have the guardrails that make them feel like this is a good idea for me to do. I'll give myself permission to do. And they don't have any anchors in the way. It's like, okay, why do you think this is a bad idea? We've nailed in all the logical things about why you should be performing at an elite level. But that means there's a subconscious part in you that is resisting that. And then it's really about nailing in that story. And I think that's why I remember one of the things that surprised to me when you joined the arena, you were like, oh, you didn't ask me about my past at all at the beginning. And I was shocked about that. I was like, yeah, this is not about it. It's about like, first we got to figure out where you want to get to and how we can get that. And only then, as a necessary evil, we'll look at the past if we need to, which I think is what a lot of, let's call it mindset programs or whatever, are missing. Like, it's honestly something just not necessary from what I've seen to dig into that. And like, it's only the last resort. You want to first figure out all these illogical things that, okay, like then if all these things are in place, why is your subconscious fighting it? And the interesting thing is also that if you've already done all that prep work of figuring out what are the exact things you should be doing and what are the things that you should, have in your life so that you're not resisting it and so on, you again corner your mind. Like, not just spouting out 1,000 different reasons that are invalid, but no, this is actually the reason you're still resisting doing that after all that. And you can find the resistance really, really quickly, and you can challenge it if it's valid or not. That's usually the 5 steps that I go through in my head very, very quickly when I talk to someone. And it's an arsenal that I think everybody could have to really understand, like, if they're feeling stuck, if someone else feels stuck, if an employee of theirs is feeling stuck, whatever it may be, you run them through this filter, you usually find out what's causing it.
And so that 5th step, could you just, how would you say that's qualification or it's validation? Like, how would you put a label on?
I call it emotional fortitude.
Okay.
Like, the thing is, like, if you have a story in your head about why something, and this is it's a great point you bring up. So if you have a story in your head about why something is still a bad idea, even if you realize that it's fake. So for example, if you think that if I do all these outreach, people are going to make fun of me and I'm going to be outcasted because that's what happened to you once in grade school, which is like a true story from an entrepreneur. He got made fun of once on the bus when he moved to a new town because he tried to tell a joke on the first day and everybody made fun of him. And 30 years later, he had this assumption in his head that if I try to reach out to new people, they're going to make fun of me without knowing it. It stopped him from really networking and growing his business. So even once you logically recognize that this isn't true, and you're like, okay, this isn't true. This is a story in my head that I have to recognize that when I'm about to do the action, down to the T, like you said, reach out to 10 people every day in this kind of way and follow up, that part of my brain is still going to scream, don't do it, don't do it. That's when I have to have that fortitude over my emotions to be able to say, this feels uncomfortable. A part of me is yelling, run for the hills, but I'm not going to listen to that part of me and I'm just going to do the thing.
I think counseling, therapy, a lot of conversation-based dynamics where people are trying to get a relief or ascending in something, default to let's go back into the history books and unpack your life. And it can very easily become this sort of perpetual sort of hamster wheel of rehashing former wins or losses, but never actually moving things forwards. And a fitness analogy here, if someone said, I want to lose weight, it's like, great. Your choices are chicken salad and tuna salad. And guess what? You spend as many hours a day moving and doing difficult stuff as possible. That's almost a guaranteed way to lose weight. Now, they're going to probably start talking about their food preferences and their schedule. And it's not that stuff doesn't have a context. It's just if you keep pulling on that thread, eventually you're going back to talking about so much stuff from the past. You've lost sight of results. The efficient, effective path to the outcome you're looking for.
Results, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wonder how much of that, like, it's interesting when I heard you speak, because also I am in Israel right now. I'm visiting family and talk a lot, and I'm still in contact with a bunch of military friends and guys from the special ops and the Shin Bet. And how much of that is because we were never asked what we want to do. They were like, this is what you guys need to do, like in boot camp and all that. You're never asked. There's not like, how do you guys speak about this? It's like, this is the result we need to do, go. And we're like, all right, we need to figure it out. Like, so we were like, tired, sleep deprived, shaved up. Like, okay, you still got to do this. And perhaps that's a big reason why I go at it like this. It's just this, first off, from a competitive standpoint, it's just about getting results. And that's what's exciting. But also what's kind of, I think, how would I say, enhance that desire in me or taught me that this is a good thing is that from what I've seen, again, I don't deal with people with trauma. I want to say that's very different. But when anyone that I've worked with, the best way to enhance their self-image is by helping them achieve bigger things and better things. And it's like a lot of these things that we think we need to talk about in order to get through. It's like, you know what if we can just disprove all that notion about your self-esteem by helping you do a lot of really cool shit that you're really excited about and it's aligned with what you want. And then you can tell yourself, oh wait, if I'm doing these kind of things on a consistent basis, this is who I am.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden those things we don't even need to talk about because you're like, oh, they're just irrelevant. That's who I was, but this is who I am. Oh, okay, great. It just nullifies a lot of that. I think that's also honestly why, like, you see how passionate I am when I talk about this stuff and how it lights me up, because that's the transformation that I think actually makes an impact. It's not about just talking about your past and making it and healing it. What if we can just move you to a place where you're like, oh, that's not even me. That was old me. That's not even relevant anymore. Because look at all this evidence that I've just accrued. So let's help you accrue this evidence so you can win. And aside from like the financial wins and so on, like it's also the internal one. You're like, okay, this is who I am today.
Exactly. Like that sort of colloquial term, that guy's about it. More or less is sort of summarizing someone who, like, they're defining themselves by their actions.
Yeah.
Not sort of, always pointing back to the past and trying to sort of draw, engineer stories from it. It was just, if I define myself as being a person who achieves X, Y, Z, these are the actions I have to do. I just repeat those actions. My confidence now comes from these consistently repeated actions, and I don't need to attend like a motivational pep talk or do any kind of woo-woo spiritual healing. I know what I'm about because I'm about doing it every single day. It just becomes so ingrained into their psychology just through action.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it, you don't have to heal your old stuff if you just feel like it's not relevant for you anymore. If it's still part of that old stuff is me, then yeah, you need to heal it, quote unquote. But if like that's just not me, like everything in my life is showing that's not me. What we talked about with the relationship examples. Once they let go, like, okay, I don't have to deal with like, why was I so afraid to let go of this person, or why was I so afraid to be alone? Okay, because everyone's afraid. That's just a general thing. We're all afraid to be alone. But when I look at who I am today, I'm like, oh, wow, I do all these scary things. I do all these uncomfortable things. Great. Oh, I guess that's who I was 5 years ago, 3 years ago. It's not who I am today. Happy days. Move on. And all of a sudden, like, these things that a lot of people talk about needing to heal become non-issues.
Mm-hmm. Really helpful.
Cool. So, yep. So those are the 5 things. So obviously, this wasn't as tactical as in depth on how to do that, but this is something that I was going to say we're going to talk about anyway with the AI. I think it's going to be irrelevant. Like, this isn't an age anymore where you get to, hoard information or whatever. Like, all the information is out there. And even before the whole AI thing started, we were going to write the book, and we did write the book, and it's coming out soon. And we're sharing exactly how to do all these steps. So this could be a framework that if any of these things hit home as like, oh, this is my constraint, this is actually what I think is going on here. Inside the book, there's an exact method and step-by-step of how you actually do this. And we're also going to be releasing AI tools that are book companions to help you do this by yourself. So first off, that's all available for pre-order now. It will be live October 1st. There's going to be a link in the show notes where you can find it. I think the book is literally putting it at $2 for now in the pre-order. It's never going to be cheaper than this. So that's that. Now, with this said, I want to talk a little bit about AI and let's call it coaching, community, whatever it may be, where I think there's still an importance for people to get outside just them and a tool. And I know, Alex, this is honestly like where you have, I think, a lot more domain expertise than me with AI. And this could be a very interesting conversation. So I want to share, before we get into it, a story. So somebody who was actually an old teacher of mine, an old jiu-jitsu teacher of mine, reached out to me about 2 months ago. And he's a multiple time world champion. He had like legit black belt at the highest level. One of these guys that when I would roll with him, I would just think to myself, maybe this jiu-jitsu thing is not for me. He was like, yeah, it was just like, all right. And he was even, he was my weight class. It still felt like that, which rarely happens. And basically he reached out to me and he was like, hey man, like, would you be open if we have a chat? I've seen some of your content and so on. And I said, cool. And he was basically telling me that some of his stuff in his life since the last time we met, which was about like 9 years ago, hasn't gone great. Like, his academy's kind of like been on a down and all this, and some of his personal relationships aren't that great. Like, people aren't as, they don't reach out to him as much anymore, or they don't bring them into certain opportunities or certain things or whatever it may be. And he was telling me about his goal. And his goal was just to basically like have a farm somewhere in Brazil that he could have. And it was a very low key goal. And he was saying, you know, I mean, it's like I recognize things aren't like always going to be amazing. So just like kind of like temper down my goals. And I just want to like do things simply, you know what I mean? And, but I'm not getting any opportunities and this is kind of tough. And I asked him if I could just be very honest with him. And he said, yes. I was like, dude, the way you're living is just extremely unattractive to people. Like when you see someone who's unexcited about life, when he's just trying to do like the smallest thing possible, are you going to want to connect with him? Like if you have a student in your gym who just says, you know what, I'm not athletic, I'm not really going to go for it, I just want to do the bare minimum, and maybe someday I'll get to blue belt or purple belt. Are you going to be invested in him like you would see some student who's like, dude, I really want to get to black belt and I want to compete? And he said no. And I was like, okay, so like that's the reality, man. It's like I get what you're trying to do is it feels logical, but if you're trying to live a diminished life, no one is going to want to do that with you. They're not going to bring you into business opportunity. We spoke before that business opportunity some of the friends have. They're not going to want to bring you in because when they look at you, they're like, oh, he's not the guy who's really going for it. And he just was like, man, fuck. Sorry for that. He was like, fuck. No one tells me this stuff, man. And he's like, my girlfriend, you know, she'll tell me this, like not really tell me this, but only yell at me something like that when we get into a fight. And it comes out like how he said, like as a resentment thing, not as a place where she's calm and can tell him this on like a caring, compassionate level, not a place where he's able to receive it. And he was like, man, like no one tells me this kind of stuff. And he was very grateful and very appreciative of it. And I think this is still where a lot of the AI stuff falls behind. And like, especially like I work a lot with ChatGPT and with Claude, and it annoys the crap out of me when they do something and I try to fix it and I'm like, I change it, do it my way. And I'm like, what do you think about this? And the initial response is that it's a great improvement because of this and this. I'm like, no. I want honest feedback. And it could be that I'm not prompting it correctly. But that place of somebody to say the very honest truth that is very uncomfortable, but is the thing that you need to hear, that is still rare, both from, again, this could be a prompting thing where I don't get AI correctly, but also because another human, you're probably going to listen to it on a different level than AI yet. You know, we're not used to really receiving that kind of feedback from AI and internalizing the same way we do with another human being. What are your thoughts on this, man? As someone who's much more into the realm.
I need to self audit the feedback that I get from AI on almost every single prompt. Here's why I think I need to do that at least. One is that the LLMs are essentially training off your interactions with them, and we don't know what the weights are. In the same way, we don't know what a social media algorithm is. We don't know how the actual weighting of this algorithm has been set up. But for sure, it's been optimized to essentially be some form of reinforcement tool. So if you go onto ChatGPT, whatever model you're using, and like, hey, I'm thinking this, but maybe that, it's myself going to say, what a profound insight, Tom. You know, yeah, that was a profound insight. So it's got a lot of these sort of inbuilt niceties to reinforce the way you're thinking. That's just what I've observed as a user. So anytime I'm trying to think out loud with the tool, even though I'm trying to extrapolate on a thought or to qualify something, I massively try to avoid blind spots or biases by then prompting it saying, great, where's my blind spots? If you had to find a blind spot in my thinking, where is it? Where's a breakdown in logics in this? But it doesn't naturally give that to you. And that's where I think we can separate the AI tools right now versus the human being, because the human being right now, if they have the skills or experience in whatever the topic is, they're more likely going to pick up on your sort of the BS reads. They're going to have a better pattern recognition than the technology. They might be able to play devil's advocate from a place of love and care, not from a place of trying to sort of bring you down. And if that means is they have to point out some hard truths or quiz you on some things that maybe you're very confident on that you shouldn't be as confident on. I found that to play out in my interpersonal relationships much more than I have in my relationships with the AI model. So whilst they're incredibly powerful, I think that people have put far too much trust into these tools far too quickly. It's profound to think that it was only a few years ago we're looking at the first release of GPT as like a better email writer. And now people are talking to this thing almost like some form of digital god. And GPT said this, that must be true, but not recognizing that it's likely reinforcing. It's optimized towards telling you what you want to hear or telling you that you're right, not necessarily overwhelming you with evidences about where you might be incorrect. And so that was what my sort of the spidey sense was as I'm going into more complex. I'm doing a pretty complex investment proposal at the moment on a business. And as I'm getting a lot of these feedbacks from GPT, like, that's really smart. That's really clever. I'm like, hang on a second. You tell me what I want to hear, or is this actually right? So yeah, that's sort of my 2 cents on AI right now. I think it's a very powerful tool, but like all tools, it could be used for great constructive or destructive, or even like keeping you stagnant. And so I think we're a long way from having a perfect tool. And so using the tools for where they're great, and also using human beings for where they're great, that's probably where we're at right now.
It's interesting that I am going to assume that at a certain point it will become the perfect tool, so to speak. And it'll know, like, it'll ask you at the beginning, like, hey, what kind of conversation do you want to have today? Do you want to have an honest, tough love conversation? Are you at a place where it'll ask it all these kind of like tender ways? Or are you at a place where you're a bit more tired, you just want support? Like, what is it? And what I'm curious about, and we'll just see how we adapt it, is how we'll be able to receive it as human beings. So, for example, with that guy, even if an AI would have told him, like, hey, man, you're living a diminished life and nobody wants to be with you right now because of that, it's one thing seeing that from an AI tool. It's another thing seeing that from someone he has a personal connection with. And I'm like, we were over Zoom, but I'm still metaphorically putting my hand on his shoulder in a very, like, obviously, dude, I want what's best for you kind of way, and saying it in that. And just because of that, regardless of what I'm saying, how it's being able to receive, he's able to receive it. And I wonder if it'll get to a point where also, we get so accustomed to AI, and perhaps it'll be looking like an AI avatar on Zoom or whatever it may be, that it could get to that level. But yeah, I think until it does, go for it.
I think we've got those performance anchors right now of, I want to be right, or I want to feel comfortable. We don't need any more diet books. Sorry for cost analogies back to fitness. But we're done with diet books, and we don't need to learn any more about how the body responds to training stimulus. So why is there anyone still complaining that they're overweight or don't have as much muscle mass? Because all the tools are out there already. Well, they just don't like what the tools tell them to do. And I think the same is true for business, personal relationships, etc. In your background, you don't make it into these units by being told that you're amazing and that was good enough. It's very high expectations, very rigid standards, and sort of brutal auditing of what performance is. I haven't seen any AI tools come out just yet, unless OpenAI will release AI dark version. The David.
I was going to actually.
Willig.
I actually wanted to ask you about this because, and again, I'm not as literate in AI. DeepSeek was Chinese, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Have you played? First off, have you played with it?
I haven't played with DeepSeek. No.
I'd be curious about that because we both know the Asian culture, especially the Chinese, could be a lot more blunt, a lot more direct. Like in-laws will see, will be like, "Hey, you have gained weight. You are fat. You need." I've heard some like meeting their in-laws and be like, "Hey, you need to get." Their in-laws first, like they haven't seen them in 3 years. You would look better with a nose job. Things of that nature. So I would be curious to see how culturally wired the AI is to, let's call it the Northern California kind of wokey culture versus a more Chinese culture. That would have been an interesting thing to see.
That's a great point. And that might become one of the things that separates these different technologies right now. Right now, with each release, we're sort of saying that, Claude is slightly better than this one for these things, but maybe over time where they do become quite divergent in their application is on some kind of a spectrum. These models are more likely to tell you what you want to hear and still have a benefit to you, but optimized towards your sort of a congruence or feeling good. These ones over here are most likely to get what you want, but they're also the most brutal, painful, honest, etc. And for a lot of people, they might choose to have a lesser performing tool, but be more comfortable as opposed to the most performing tool in peak discomfort.
Yeah, there'll be like a gauge in ChatGPT 1 through 10. Like, how extreme do you want to take this thing? But yeah, I think so.
AI needs to be created.
which is honestly what we're trying to create. We're trying to put my frameworks and all that on top of an AI, so it filters it in that way. But that's going to be honestly like one of the things that we said as an AI companion for the book for people who buy it. But to kind of get back to the point where I think, again, like knowledge isn't rare right now, but accountability from someone that you respect and you care about, that can be. So this is not something you have to have performance coaching with, but you do need to have people outside of your own head, whether that's a mastermind, whether that's a community, whether it's a social group that meets on a consistent basis, whatever it may be. It's like the reality is it is very hard for us to see ourselves outside ourselves, myself included. It's like everyone included. And if you don't have somebody or people in your life that can do that for you, most likely you're just going to keep tripping yourself up without being aware of why it is happening. So that was the big thing I wanted to say about AI. It's like absolutely use AI tools and at the same time have people in your life that will point out the things that you didn't even know you needed to prompt the AI about because there were such blind spots of yours.
Yeah.
So that was my message for today.
For those entrepreneurs who are listening to this, Itamar, who they might have, through listening to this pod, they might have heard some takeaways that they're not as clear on the outcomes they're looking for. They need to sort of increase that clarity, get clearer on what the actions and what the focuses need to be, what the performance acres likely are. How would they best find that human element of coaching? Is this a great opportunity for them to jump on the pre-sales for the book? Applications currently open for Arena. How can someone who's looking to move their business forwards or just move their life forwards find that tool in here and now?
As like I said, like applications are open for the Arena for the Q4 one. Also, the book is on pre-order. It's going to be the cheapest. We're going to do it. We're going to do all sorts of big things for the launch of it. Not big marketing things, but also big kind of, let's call it application workshops. We can actually take these tools and apply them, and we're all going to do it together, whether they're going to be one in-person event, one virtual event. So to make sure that, again, people just take this knowledge and actually apply it to their life. And it's going to be free for anybody who buys the book. And I think leaves it a review. That's how we're doing it right now. But yeah, like basically, if any of this resonates, you're welcome to reach out. But if it's not me and it's someone else, just find someone you respect to be able to tell you the truth and to say it in a way where you'll be open to receiving it and want to receive it and take it to the next level and action. Like that's the main thing. Have people around you that you deeply respect and that are willing to have those very uncomfortable conversations with you because they care more about you than the comfort they're feeling at the very moment. I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah. And understanding those 4 C's, which, if someone's saying, I don't feel confident in right now, I don't feel confident in business, relationships, etc. Well, working backwards, confidence is the end outcome. Preceding that is commitment, courage, capabilities. So you're not confident because you don't have the capabilities. You don't have the capabilities because you didn't have the courage. The scariest thing you can ever do is to commit to something new. And so if that's applying for the Arena, finding a performance coach that you resonate with, taking that first step is so meaningful because essentially it's a pattern shift into what you've previously been doing before. And you might feel anxious about the commitment, etc. That's natural. As you go through that work, you start stacking capabilities and eventually you become about it because you've now built the capabilities and the confidence is the end outcome through that work that's being done.
Yep. Cool. All right. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much, Alex. And we'll see you guys on the next episode.